He didn't shout. He didn't slam the desk. He just looked her dead in the eyes and smiled. That slow, racist smile people use when they think you're too powerless to fight back. "Miss Aaliyah Carter," Dean Brooke Harrison said, tapping the torn appeal letter. "Your kind always thinks rules bend for them." Aaliyah stood frozen in the center of the oak-paneled office, the only black girl in the entire pre-med program. Still wearing the same blood-stained sweater from the night she saved that stranger on the street. 12 professors watched like she was on trial. "You missed the exam," Brooke continued, "so your scholarship is canceled. You have 48 hours to pay full tuition or you're expelled permanently." No one defended her. No one even blinked. She felt the humiliation burning under her skin, the kind of hurt that makes your throat tight, but not a single tear would fall. Her grandmother taught her that. You cry at home, baby. Out there, you stay unbreakable. Brooke leaned back in her leather chair. You people always want exceptions. Those two words, you people, were enough to silence the whole room. Aaliyah's fingers tightened around the torn paper. She had saved a life, and this was her reward. They were destroying her future because she refused to step over a dying woman to take a test. Her pulse hammered. Every breath shook, but her voice didn't. "Dean Harrison, you don't know what really happened." Brooke laughed under her breath, a cold little sound meant to slice her confidence in half. "Oh, sweetheart, it doesn't matter what happened. What matters is you don't belong here." Something inside Aaliyah snapped, not in anger, in clarity. The clarity people feel right before their life changes forever. The clarity racists never see coming until it's too late. And far above them, beyond the office windows and the quiet campus, the faint sound of a helicopter echoed over the city skyline, a sound that would rewrite everything Brooke thought she could control. If this already made your blood boil, tap like, and subscribe so you don't miss stories where justice finally wins. Aaliyah didn't look away, even as the dean smirked, even as the entire room judged her, even as the scholarship she fought 4 years for was ripped out of her hands. She picked up the torn pieces from the floor, slowly, deliberately, and walked out of that office without saying another word, because silence wasn't weakness. It was preparation, and her story was only getting started. Aaliyah didn't stop walking until she stepped out of the administration building and into the cold morning air. The silence outside made the memory hit her even harder. The moment everything had gone wrong. 3 days earlier, the sky had been raining like the city was trying to wash itself clean. She was running toward the science hall, clutching her backpack, terrified of being late for the exam that counted for 40 of her grade. That's when she saw her. A woman lying on the sidewalk, unconscious, bleeding, lips turning blue. People were stepping around her like she was trash on the street. Some recorded. No one helped. Aaliyah dropped her bag instantly. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" Nothing. Instinct took over. The CPR training she studied for years. Every step came back like second nature. She pressed her palms over the woman's chest, counted compressions, cleaned the airway, turned her gently to prevent spinal damage. Her phone buzzed nonstop. Classmates reminding her the exam had already started. But she didn't stop. Not when she saw the woman's pulse flicker. Not when the rain mixed with blood. Not when her own hands shook from fear. She stayed until the ambulance arrived. The paramedic knelt beside her, stunned. "You saved her," he breathed. Another 5 minutes and he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Aaliyah reached campus 40 minutes late, drenched, shaking, shoes ruined. She begged the professor at the door to let her in. He didn't even look up from his clipboard. Policy is policy. No exceptions. He closed the door in her face. From that moment, things spiraled. The staff ignored her email explanations. Admin rejected her appeal without reading it. Rumors spread that she skipped the exam because she wasn't prepared. Professors whispered about quota students needing special treatment. Her phone buzzed with messages from classmates, some sympathetic, some laughing behind her back. Later that evening, she went home to her grandmother's tiny apartment. Water dripping from the ceiling, rent overdue. Her grandmother held her close. "You did the right thing, baby. Don't ever regret. saving a life. God saw everything. Aaliyah wanted to believe her. She really did. But the world didn't reward people like her for doing the right thing. It punished them. And as she lay awake that night, staring at the cracked ceiling, she wondered one thing. How do you fight an entire system designed to crush you? She didn't know the answer. Not yet, but it was coming. Aaliyah woke up the next morning with a heaviness in her chest that didn't feel like sadness anymore. It felt like pressure, the kind that builds right before something breaks. She tried distracting herself by cleaning the small kitchen, reheating leftover oatmeal, brushing dust off her grandmother's old Bible, anything to avoid thinking about the expulsion letter sitting on the counter. Then her cracked phone lit up. Unknown number. She almost declined it. She had no energy for more humiliation. But some strange pull made her swipe to answer. A calm voice spoke through the static. "Miss Carter? My name is Attorney Isabella Moore. I represent someone who's been trying very hard to contact you." Aaliyah froze. "Represent who?" "Someone who owes their life to you," the lawyer replied. A quiet pause followed, long enough for Aaliyah's stomach to drop. "The woman you saved," the lawyer continued. "She wants to meet you. Immediately. And she's, let's just say, not someone who usually waits." The room felt colder. Her heartbeat stuttered. Why would a stranger, someone with real power, from the way this lawyer spoke, want her? If this happened in front of you, what would you do? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. And if you stand for fairness, hit subscribe. Aaliyah gripped the edge of the counter. What does she want from me? It's better discussed in person, the lawyer said. She asked me to arrange a meeting downtown. Tomorrow morning. Transportation will be provided. Transportation? Who is this woman? Aaliyah swallowed hard. Look, I didn't save her for attention. Or money. I know, the lawyer said gently. That's exactly why she wants to see you. Before Aaliyah could respond, her grandmother stepped into the kitchen, tying her robe. Who was that, baby? Aaliyah hesitated. I think someone important wants to meet me. Her grandmother's eyebrows rose. Important like what? I don't know, Aaliyah whispered. But she did know something. Important people didn't call girls like her. Not from this neighborhood. Not from a family barely making rent. Not after an expulsion. Her grandmother placed her weathered hands on Aaliyah's shoulders. Sometimes blessings hide inside storms. Aaliyah wished she could believe that, but all she felt was confusion and fear. After her grandmother returned to her room, Aaliyah replayed the call in her mind. Every word, every tone, every pause. Something wasn't adding up. Why didn't the lawyer say the woman's name? Why the secrecy? Why the sudden urgency? She looked at the torn scholarship letter on the table, at the unpaid bills, at her backpack still stained with someone else's blood. Whatever was coming, it was bigger than the exam she missed. And in the hollow quiet of the apartment, for the first time since the humiliation, Aaliyah felt something unexpected. Not fear, momentum. Something was about to shift. She could feel it. The next morning, Aaliyah stood outside her building staring at something she had only ever seen in movies. A black luxury SUV waiting at the curb, engine humming softly in the cold air. A man in a tailored coat stepped out, glanced at a clipboard, then at her. Miss Aaliyah Carter? She nodded, still unsure whether to run or get in. Please, we've been instructed to bring you safely. The ride to the city's financial district felt unreal. She clutched her backpack tightly, watching skyscrapers rise around them, glass towers that made her grandmother's neighborhood feel like a different world. When the SUV finally stopped, the driver opened the door to a marble building with revolving golden doors. A receptionist guided her through quiet hallways lined with abstract art. Every step echoed. Every corner smelled of expensive wood polish. Aaliyah wiped her palms on her jeans, suddenly aware of the faded fabric, the loose thread near her knee. She didn't belong here. Anyone could see it. But when the conference room doors opened, everything hit her at once. Inside sat the woman she had saved. She looked different without the blood. Elegant gray hair, flawless posture, a thin scar on her forehead. Her presence filled the room before she even spoke. "Miss Carter," she said, standing with visible effort, "I'm Victoria Hale, and you saved my life." Aaliyah didn't know what to say. "I just did what anyone should do." Victoria shook her head. "Anyone didn't. You did." Beside Victoria sat attorney Isabella Moore, and two men with laptops already open, analysts from the look of them. Aaliyah felt small in that room, like a high school kid stepping into a board meeting she wasn't invited to. "Sit," Victoria said softly. "We have a lot to discuss." Aaliyah lowered herself into the chair, heart pounding. "We spent the last 3 days reviewing your case," Isabella began. "Your expulsion, the denied appeal, the comments made by Dean Harrison." Aaliyah's jaw clenched. "They said I don't belong." "Yes," Isabella replied. "We saw that." Victoria slid a tablet across the table. "We also pulled academic records from your department. On the screen were charts, numbers, comparisons. Do you know," Victoria said slowly, "that in the last 5 years, 92 of black students requesting emergency exam deferments were denied, while 87 of white students were quietly approved?" Aaliyah blinked, stunned. "What?" "It's systematic," Isabella said. "Not a misunderstanding. Not a policy. A pattern." Victoria leaned forward. "And your dean, Brooke Harrison, is at the center of it." The second analyst tapped a key. Screenshots, email threads, grade audits, procedural violations. A tidal wave of evidence washed across the display. Aaliyah felt overwhelmed. I don't understand. Why are you showing me all this?" "Because," Victoria said, "I don't believe in coincidences. You saved my life, and your school tried to destroy yours." Her voice hardened. "I don't offer charity, Aaliyah. I offer justice." Aaliyah swallowed, unsure whether to smile, cry, or run. What do you want me to do?" Victoria folded her hands. "I want you to walk back into that university, legally protected, fully reinstated, unbreakable." She paused. "And then together we expose every racist thread woven into that place." Aaliyah felt her breath catch. For the first time, someone powerful wasn't talking down to her. They were talking with her. This wasn't mercy. This wasn't pity. This was a war plan. And for once, she wasn't fighting alone. The next morning, campus looked different. Not physically. The same brick buildings, the same trim lawns, the same cold stairs leading to the science hall, but something in the air had shifted. Students whispered before she even reached the doors. Professors paused mid-conversation. Even the security guard, who never looked up from his phone, straightened the moment he saw her. Aaliyah walked to the courtyard with Victoria's legal team trailing behind her, briefcases in hand, step-by-step instructions echoing in her mind. The university had reinstated her enrollment at 6:12 a.m., a move forced through so aggressively that administrators were still scrambling to update records when she arrived. Every eye followed her. Every whisper carried the same disbelief. She wasn't supposed to come back. And definitely not like this. When she pushed open the main hallway doors, a silence rippled outward. Students froze. A couple of white faculty members immediately turned away. And at the end of the hall, like a queen ruling over a kingdom of fear, stood Dean Brooke Harrison. Brooke's eyes widened, just for a split second, enough to betray the fear she'd been hiding for years. Aaliyah didn't raise her voice. She didn't make a scene. She just smiled, the quiet, confident kind that tells an entire institution, "You're not ready for what's coming. If you believe talent can silence every insult, share this video. And to everyone watching from the US, UK, and Canada, your voice matters." Brooke recovered quickly, stepping forward with her familiar cold smirk. "Well," she said sharply, "look who finally decided to act like a student." Aaliyah held her gaze. "No, I decided to act like someone who knows the truth." Behind her, Attorney Isabella Moore opened a leather folder. "Dean Harrison," she said, "we need to speak with the full board. Immediately." Brooke scoffed. "Board meetings are scheduled, not demanded." "Not anymore," Isabella replied, handing her a document. "This is a legal order requiring your presence." Brooke's face paled. What is this? Victoria Hale's voice came from behind Aaliyah, calm and powerful. The beginning. A heartbeat passed. Another. And then something extraordinary happened. Every professor who had mocked Aaliyah, every administrator who refused her appeal, every classmate who whispered about quota students, they all watched as Brooke, the woman who ran the school like a private empire, was forced to turn around and walk toward the boardroom, not in control, not in command, but cornered. As they moved to the hallway, Aaliyah felt the weight she'd been carrying for 4 years start to lift. She wasn't invisible anymore. She wasn't powerless. The whispers around her didn't sound like judgment today. They sounded like fear, of the truth, of consequences, of Aaliyah finally having a voice matched with real power behind her. And when she reached the boardroom doors, she understood one thing clearly. This wasn't the end of her fight. It was the beginning of Brooke's downfall. The boardroom felt colder than any place Aaliyah had ever stepped into. 12 members sat around a long, polished table, each one shifting uncomfortably as Brooke Harrison entered, no longer confident, no longer untouchable. Aaliyah followed with Victoria, Isabella, and the legal team. The room tightened like a fist. The dean cleared her throat and tried to reclaim her old authority. Let's begin. We have an urgent disciplinary matter. Victoria cut her off with a single raised hand. No, we have evidence. The projector warmed up with a low hum. Isabella tapped a key, and the first document appeared, a spreadsheet filled with cold numbers and undeniable patterns. For 5 years, Isabella said, black students requesting emergency accommodations were denied at a rate of 92%. A hush fell. Meanwhile, she continued, white students with lower grades, poorer attendance, and weaker records received silent approvals. Murmurs broke out around the table. Brooke's face lost all color. This is taken out of context, she snapped. Victoria's calm voice sliced through her denial. Your context is discrimination. Screenshots flashed next. Private group chats where professors mocked black students, questioned their intelligence, and joked about quota admissions. Brooke's name appeared in several messages. One counselor gasped. Another shut his eyes, ashamed. Then came the recordings. Brooke's voice filled the room. We can't keep lowering standards just because certain groups push their agendas. Some students don't belong in elite programs. Another recording followed. The one no one was prepared for. Brooke again. I can guarantee your son's approval for $15,000 and $5,000 for materials. He doesn't even need to attend half the classes. The room erupted. 3 board members stood. One whispered, my God. Another said, this is criminal. Aaliyah didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her silence carried the weight of every barrier she had survived. Isabella placed more documents on the table. Bank transfers, encrypted emails, altered grades, bribe trails leading to offshore accounts. This, she said, is not one bad decision. It is a system of racism, corruption, and financial fraud. Brooke finally broke. Her voice shook. This is a setup. This girl manipulated. Victoria leaned forward. She saved my life. Meanwhile, you tried to destroy hers. And today, you answer for that. The board chair straightened his papers with trembling hands. Dr. Brooke Harrison, you are terminated immediately. Security will escort you out. You will face state and federal charges for discrimination, falsification of records, and bribery. Brooke's knees buckled. The guard stepped in. Her empire, the one she thought no black girl could ever threaten, collapsed in minutes. Aaliyah watched without flinching, not out of cruelty, but because justice, when it finally arrives, is never gentle. When the boardroom doors finally closed behind the guards escorting Brooke away, Aaliyah remained standing for a moment, breathing in the silence she never thought she'd hear. The sound of a corrupt system cracking open at the seams. It didn't feel like victory. Not yet. It felt like release, like finally being able to stand upright after years of being pressed down. Victoria placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. It's done, she said quietly. You took back what they tried to steal. But Aaliyah wasn't thinking about Brooke. She was thinking about the other black students who never got this chance. The ones who left quietly. The ones who swallowed injustice because fighting meant losing everything. She walked out of the building slowly, the cold air hitting her face like a new beginning. Students watched from a distance, some in awe, some ashamed, some suddenly realizing she wasn't the girl they thought they could ignore. A few whispered her name with a kind of respect she had never felt on this campus. When she reached the courtyard, her grandmother was waiting near a bench, small in her faded sweater, eyes shining. Aaliyah rushed to her, and for the first time since all this began, her breath hitched. "You stood tall, baby," her grandmother whispered into her hair, "and you didn't let them break you." Aaliyah smiled through the tightness in her chest. "I didn't do it alone." Over the next weeks, the university changed. Permanent policies were rewritten. Anonymous reporting lines were opened. Racial bias audits became mandatory. Professors who once mocked her avoided her gaze. The ones who supported her finally stepped forward. Brooke Harrison's fall sent shockwaves across the academic world. Lawsuits, news headlines, public outrage. Her offshore accounts were frozen. Her license revoked. Institutions she once influenced cut all ties. She became a cautionary tale, not a leader. 1 month later, Aaliyah returned to class, not as a girl who was too afraid to speak, but as a student whose courage forced an institution to look at its own reflection. Her seat, once a place she felt she had to earn daily, now felt like it finally belonged to her. And on the day she walked back into the lab for her first practical exam, something moved across the sky, a low, familiar hum. She stepped outside just in time to see a helicopter passing overhead, glinting in the sun, a reminder of a moment that changed everything, of a life she saved, and of the strength she found in herself when the world pushed her to break. This time, she didn't look away. She just walked forward, exactly where she was always meant to be,